reconvene. It's 7 minutes past 2. We'll go to item 19. I'll move, seconded by Councillor Mallett. There's no questions. Okay, we'll move to debate. Is there any debate? Okay, Councillor Gary will start, and then Councillor Paula.
I speak against this. I come from a philosophy of small government. I think the smaller the government, the more freedom there is in society. I think that local government already has way expanded its capture or reach beyond where it should be. It's attacking private property, it's attacking people's wages and salaries. And unsadly, this draft, which I think, well no I'm not, I know, takes us back to the old situation where the government expands even more. So I speak strongly against it and will not be supporting it.
Councillor Paula.
On the other hand, I fully support this and welcome it. Reason being is that, well, we're well aware that the government's thinking is to ensure that the 4 well-beings of the community are better met in this next term. And I think actually this is in line with international and global thinking on how you measure well-beings for a community and how you need to go beyond just GDP or inflation type measures, which are economic measures, and start looking at a number of the other progress indicators around the 4 natural capitals, which includes strong people and communities. So this is absolutely on point with thinking that the OECD has undertaken and their living standards framework, and a number of other ways of looking at the benefits of what we do to the community, some of which, councillors, for your information, I shared with you in the update that I gave from my attendance at a forum by Sport New Zealand on Friday in Wellington. And that framework work is very useful and very relevant, and will be able to help us frame the relative values of the work we do here. So this is a step in the right direction. I appreciate the work that staff have put into it. Therefore, I'm happy to move it.
Councillor Angela.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. 2 parts to the submission. One is being spoken by Councillor Southgate in support of the community wellbeings. The second part of this allows council excuse me, to charge developers development contributions towards community facilities. It fairly distributes the cost of those community facilities to those developers, because communities are made up of much more than roads and houses. Communities are first and foremost made up by people, and people value community facilities like theatres, libraries, swimming pools and community houses. And this change to the legislation will allow council to charge developers in new suburbs, setting up new suburbs for those community facilities.
Okay, we'll go to the board to vote. We had a mover and a seconder. No, it was moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Gary. We're into debate and now we're voting, so we're well past that.
Motion is carried, 6-4, 1 against.
Okay, we'll now move to the item C5, which isn't C5 anymore, on page 14.
Down the open, Mr. Mayor.
Which is, yes, still in the open. No, you're right, stay there. No, okay, so C4. So I'll move, seconded by Councillor James. Is there any discussion? Yes, councillor.
I'll do my best, Councillor Leary.
Chief Executive, page 16, just the redevelopment clause. I took a little sharp gasp of breath on that when I first read it. However, appreciate the commercial rights of the chiefs.
Yes.
If we were to force them out of an early lease, and I'm assuming that that's what that is about, is that sort of a standard clause that we put into lease agreements?
Generally, it's probably codifying what is standard practice, and some commercial lease agreements will have that in there, some won't. But generally, if there's not one in there and you force someone out of a lease, those are generally the calculations that are used through the courts to award damages if that has happened.
So does this clause in the contract define it to redevelopment only? Or
Yes.
It does?
Yep.
So if for a different reason council wanted them to exit the lease, then that clause wouldn't apply, a different best practice clause would?
What would happen in that case would negotiate. If we couldn't reach agreement through negotiation, it would go to court, and that clause there would probably form a basis for a conversation. Should be 10. And the term of the agreement is for 10 years initially with right of renewal, so effectively that limits it in that respect.
Yeah, and the quantum is obviously a lot more than because you've then say extraordinary example, but say 1 year after the first 10 years, we decide for whatever reason that we want to them to exit the lease. Is the quantum, is the figures that you've put in that up to a maximum of 2.5 million plus GST, is that based on their expected revenue over any outstanding term of the contract, or is it just an arbitrary figure that's been plucked out of the year?
What's really awesome
Chad.
is
Chad's just arrived.
yeah, it is a fairly straightforward clause, but
Yeah.
if you want to ask this man here, and he'll give you an answer that makes sense.
So Chad, we're on page 16.
Explaining the
and we're in the
redevelopment
bottom
clause.
box, the redevelopment.
Can I check, are we publicly excluded or are we?
No, we're not. We're on air. Everybody's
open?
watching.
Yes, and it's been moved into open by the agenda setting at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay, because I'm not sure that chiefs were comfortable with that.
Well, we're there, and we're going
there
there,
now.
and there's nothing confidential in this document that hasn't been talked about already.
No.
So we're about to vote, and we've got one question here on the redevelopment clause.
2 questions. Councillor McPherson has a question.
So it was number 16.
So page 16,
page
and the redevelopment in the bottom box on the right-hand corner.
So Chad, the Chief Executive has answered my first part of the question, which is this is fairly standard practice for a commercial lease agreement to have a clause similar to
Correct.
this.
Yep.
My second follow-up question to that was around the quantum of money. It says up to a maximum of 2.5 million. Can you just explain how you came up with that figure?
So that figure's been negotiated with the chiefs. That's on the basis that if we take the boxes away and they don't have the opportunity to continue to generate the revenue out of the investment that they've made, so there's an opportunity cost component to that, and there is also the, I guess, a reimbursement for the capital cost that's gone on up front. So it's 2 components to that.
So I just want to propose a change to the report, and in that redevelopment clause it should read 10 years. I would have thought, Chad, not 15 years, because when you go back to the term, it's 10 years.
But there's a right of renewal for
Yes. We
beyond
understand
that
that,
as well.
but at that stage, at the 10-year stage, it could actually finish with no compensation paid.
If that right of renewal is at the chief's discretion. So if they chose not to extend beyond that, then that would be their choice rather than ours. Yeah. So no, the clause I think is correct as it stands.
So it's two terms, 2 rights of renewal of 5
5 years
years,
each.
so that's
So-
a 20-year lease.
Potentially, yes.
And
So
that's
that-
why it's 15 years and that.
Sorry.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chad. I said me wrong.
Okay,
So
so
good. Yeah.
so the amount is based on 1, their revenue, and 2, their capital covering the cost of
Correct.
their capital investment. Thank you, that's answered my question.
Councillor James first.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Chad. I take it that everything in this agreement we're looking at now, the board for the Chiefs were happy with?
Yes, they are. And if I can just apologise, they were expecting to or planning to be here, but they had another commitment, so they're still aiming to be here at 3 o'clock. If there's any questions, if we still go that long. So, yeah, they are still intending to be here at 3.
Councillor Dave.
Point 12 on page 15. How hard was it to get the chiefs to agree to pay the resource consent costs?
Look, I think it's fair to say that as part of the negotiation, they didn't want this agreement to stop over $15,000 worth of costs. They're obviously looking at making a fairly significant investment, and that was part of one of the concessions that they were prepared to make to get this across the line. They weren't necessarily happy with it, but they were prepared to accept that.
Thanks.
$15,000 man, Dave McPherson.
I want to cut.
Okay, so we'll go to the board to vote.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Okay, so now move to go to public excluded. I'll move, seconded by Deputy Mayor. All those for, any against? Carried.